Hello, Trey. David Trungale here. Thank you so much for sending your swing in. So, there will be three parts to this lesson. Part one, I'm going to do an analysis of your swing from down the line and face on. The second part will involve a reference to a tour player. It's always good to have a perspective on that. And then the third and final part, I want to show you a couple of drills that I think will help you. So based on your email, I can tell you have what I would define as a high golf IQ. You know, you're aware that the issue is a slice. You realize that loft is being compromised and you need to hit more up on the ball. This is just going to be pointing out some technical stuff as to how you make these changes. And before I get started, even though I'm going to be talking a lot more than two things, because I want you to get your money's worth, when you are hitting into a net like this, or when you're working on ball striking at a driving range, even though I'm going to talk about a lot of things, it's a good idea to limit yourself to one, maybe two swing thoughts at the most. If you have 5 swing thoughts going through your mind, it's going to do more harm than good. But again, this is on an online lesson, so I want to point out everything that I see. So let's get started. So first thing I would say, if we look at you over here on the face-on angle, I would flare your right foot out a little bit more. That will make the process of opening your hips easier, which affects the plane. And then I would say at setup, the shaft, I see it's in line with your left arm. I would maybe have it aimed a little bit more towards your belly button, because again, I know loft is an issue, but nice job of having it forward like this. And you know, it's okay to set up with a little more weight on the right side if needed. When you look at the swing itself, this is interesting. So the takeaway, all right, it's going underneath the plane. I'm going to shift over. I'm on the left side here. I'm going to be toggling back and forth. From the down the line view, though, this is what I would call an inside takeaway, right? It's going underneath the plane. So one way to fix that immediately, you're a left-handed player, so that would mean that your right elbow should stay facing directly towards the ground. That will minimize the rotation in your forearm so that the club does not come to the inside. Because when the club is flat going back, what we'll see, and I'll talk about later on, is you're actually a little bit steep in the transition. All right, so takeaway, too far inside, and then from this angle on the face-on view on the right, what I would say is this. I would like you to have more of a shoulder turn going on. See how your shoulders are really level, so you're at P2 right now. Ideally, you would like to see a better golf turn and even a steeper turn. And this is telling because as we continue back, if we focus on the right here, the face-on view, notice at the top how you've made a sway off the ball. So your lower body has gone beyond this yellow line that I drew. So you're leaning off the ball. Now, the good news is this is better than the alternative, which is stack and tilt, and that would even make it more difficult to get loft in the air. But once you work on a wider takeaway and a better turn, what we can accomplish from there is getting the weight more on the inside part of your trail leg. Because if you watch your left foot here, Trey, it's going to roll a bit. So you're loading to the outside part of the leg or foot. So you're creating space here, and this is going to be difficult to recover from. So when you mentioned elite ball strikers in your email, one thing you'll never see a tour pro do is when they're striking the ball, see how your hips have really not advanced at all in terms of a lateral shift. Pretty much every tour player I have ever analyzed or studied, they're going to have some lateral drive going on. as they hit the ball, and some more than others. Some guys will be here, some will be, out here. And with a driver, they tend to have less lateral drive or movement, but there's always going to be some, and then they have even more with an iron. All right. Now, I'm noticing this, still focusing on the face-on view for now. You're doing something that's pretty unique in impact. I don't see this too often. It's not too often I have to coach people out of this, but what's going on here, if we look, I know the image is a bit blurred. If you look at the logo on your glove, it's facing the camera, and the club head is somewhere down here. So you're not really releasing the club. I guess if you want the technical or anatomical terms, what you would need to do is you need to supinate your right forearm and pronate your left forearm. Because what's happening with the driver, you actually have your hands too far forward and the club is trailing. I know we're missing a frame here. But really, as you hit the ball, you want something, and I'll show you, don't worry, we'll get to the Tour Pro and some references, but you really don't want much forward shafting with the driver. I noticed on your measurements you were getting a lot of shots that only had a 4-degree launch angle, and that's going to drastically undermine your ability to hit the ball far and launch it high. And I drew this line on your head. I just wanted to make sure that your head isn't moving too far forward, because that will take away loft as well. But the main thing, again, wider in the takeaway. Work on your turn. That will help you move the lower body properly. And the reason why I brought that up, golf is a game where one movement affects the next. So if we move over to here, the down the line view, when we talk about this business of being shallow in the backswing and steep on the downswing, one way to shallow the club out is to rotate the lower body more. That actually affects the plane. So if we go down on the left, down the line view, I'm going to pause you at P5. So if you look at this, you say, you know what? This really, it's a little bit steeper than the original plane line, but not by much. You might think that, right? Ideally, we want to be parallel, or we could even get flat of it if we had to at P5. But the main thing I wanted to point out is I have a strong, we'll call it a suspicion, or if I had to guess, that when the camera was mounted, we're looking at things from sort of this angle. So you probably set the camera up where it's closer to this ball, because look where your toes are aimed. And where I'm going with this is what that will do, it's creating the illusion that the shaft is shallower than it is. So in reality, I would say your club is more like that. It might be a bit of an exaggeration. It might be more like that. So if you film yourself from the down the line view, I know this is really nitpicking, and I'm glad that you have your camera mounted. That's important. But if you set the camera up so it's more in line with your feet, or in line with the hands, I should say, that would help. The height of the camera is perfect. So, all right. So I just want to look at this again on the left. So inside, we want to reverse these conditions. Right elbow pointed down, wider in the takeaway, steeper shoulder turn, and that will set you up to shallow and transition more. Now another thing too, from this view, notice your right knee. It's very subtle, but you can see it in the transition. I'm toggling this back and forth. Your knee's actually moving forward a bit. So with all great players, you're going to notice that their knee, if they're a righty, it's their left knee. If they're a lefty, it's their right knee. It retracts immediately, almost as a trigger motion to start the downswing. So in simpler terms, your hips should be a lot more open right about here than where they are, because we want to get all that weight just mashed into your right heel coming down. And then as a result of that, so I'm just looking at the plane here. So we want the shaft coming in on, or if, to fix this, even if you want to play a little bit of a draw, we want the shaft on that left forearm, or even if it's a little bit underneath it temporarily, that's okay. All right. So let's take a look. I think it will be good. Let's take a look at a couple of really good players, and that will help make sense out of this stuff. All right, Trey, so part 2 here. I just wanted to show you, this is Lucas Glover at impact. Notice the club is in line with his right arm, pretty close anyways, and of course he's a right-handed player. I made him a lefty. I did some editing so it's easier for you to relate to. So he's going to be hitting more up on the ball than you. Now in your case, it wouldn't be bad. I don't want you to flip through impact, but even if the angle was a little bit more aimed out that way, the reason is his club speed is over. We're going to watch his whole swing here, obviously, but his club speed is over 100 miles per hour, and I think yours is a little bit under 100, so that makes a difference. But great player, underrated. He won the U.S. Open in 2009, just recently at the Masters. He's in his 40s, and he made the cut, so pretty impressive. Camera moves around a bit, a little trick, because I wasn't out there on the course when this swing occurred, so I was just looking at footage. I drew a line on something stationary, that way we can measure where it, just how much it's moving. So right here, it's returned to its original point. So we can see, like I talked about earlier, nice wide takeaway, great width. He's loading to the inside part of that trail foot. Now he has less wrist hinge than you, and I want to point this out and be clear, because you made an interesting observation about lag in your emails. So lag is your friend. It just is all about knowing when it occurs throughout the swing. So he doesn't really have much lag here. This is just extension, and he's starting to hinge the wrist, but watch this. So in the downswing and in the transition, he has more lag than you. But remember, at impact, he's hitting, if anything, more upwards than you are. So, how? Well, it's not artificial. He's advancing his hips that way, right, as he comes through. So he's using the lower body to not only open the hips, which we'll see from the other angle when I get to it in a moment, and then you can see at impact the arms are straighter, not bunched up. So again, lag is good, just the key is at some point you have to rotate the arms and release the club. So let's look at Glover from the down the line view. Alright, so just so we can see Lucas Glover from the down the line view. So again, the takeaway, check this out. It's actually just a little bit above the plane, but not by much, pretty good. Hands are going right up. Club head is not coming in here to the inside. And then again, if we pause them at P3, notice how this shaft right here, if anything, is vertical of the plane line, but this is the backswing. So steep turn, and then in transition, watch this. So now it's shallowing out, and that's, I would say, pretty close at least to being parallel to the original plane. Another thing to look for, check out this left elbow, how it's lower than the right elbow, but specifically in transition. So what he's doing here, he has a lot of external rotation going on and squeezing that in, which helps the process of shallowing, but it's a lot to digest. So the main thing, going back to the lower body, since I drew this on you, let's just check out his right knee. This is a big part of this process. Watch the second that transition starts, that right knee will retract, And again at P5, or when his right arm is parallel to the ground here, his knees are completely square. So his hips are really getting open sooner. The sooner the better. And then, of course, club is right on that left forearm here, so that will set him up to hit the ball straight or play a little bit of a draw. Does a great job of finding the original shaft plane too. You don't see that with that many players out there. Hogan did it. And then release goes around. Alright, so let me close this out by showing you a couple drills that I think will help you. So to wrap things up, a couple of neat drills I think will help you. This one is great for both your turn as well as your lower body action. This is actually myself. I was doing this in a gym. Now you can do this clearly at home. You don't have to be in a gym. Just find the corner of any wall and then just use a golf club, 7 iron, 8 iron, whatever is fine. Any club would work. Below the collarbone, I'm working on exaggerating a steep shoulder turn. And then if we watch that front knee, trying to start the downswing with the lower body and keeping my hips back on that wall. So my tailbone is staying back. We can see I'm nice and open here, going through impact, creating some tilt. Again, I think, in my opinion, it's really effective to do this. It'll help you get the feel for it. And then another thing I would do is get rid of some of these lines. This you can do out in your net as much as you want. This drill will help you for width and your turn as well. So again, I flip myself to be a lefty here. You don't have to have your right foot up. That was another element I was working on, but check this out. Just with one arm and one arm only, I'm going to create a nice wide takeaway. And then I'm going to reach with this hand and regrip the club. Now watch what this does to the shoulders. So notice how that brought the shoulder down and the shoulder back, so it increased the amount of shoulder turn that I needed before reaching P2. Now I'll just regrip. And then the beauty of this too, because there's not much wrist hinge, the club face can't flick open too much, so you're not going to really slice from here. So you can just do that with an iron or a driver. And then one other thing too, I just happened to retrieve a file here. This was a friend of mine, Clark. He's in the UK, a +3 handicap. I know the camera stationary. He sent it in himself because he wanted me to look at it. So just one more example of the setup. Ball, he's actually playing it, more. A lot of guys go on the inside of the front heel, but this is more off of the center of his foot, which is totally fine. So again, let's focus on the hips. Nice and wide going back. The bulk of the lag is right here in transition. Notice the forward advancement. And then he does a beautiful job. There we go. So this is a textbook example of coming through and hitting up on the ball with a driver. Really, really good player. All right. Well, I hope this helps, Trey. Certainly watch it more than once. Let me know how it goes. Shoot me an email. Thank you so much again.